Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Energy Healing Network. I'm your host, Coach Tim, and I'm pleased to have Sunday Oliver joining us today. How are you today, Sunday?
I'm doing pretty well and happy to be here.
Yeah, thank that. A pleasure to have you here. Definitely, definitely. Tell our audience where you're joining us from today.
I'm in Northern California in the Sierra foothills, so it's really full of trees here.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah. Well, we definitely want to kind of get into, some of the things that you have going on. So kind of share some things about yourself. And we can't wait to get to this part about you and your 28 years of I would say off the grid living.
Yeah, not all of it was completely off the grid, but a lot of it was. So yes, it was seriously off the grid, not just the expression. Yeah. Well, I can jump right into that. I will say that I came from a very sort of intellectual and musical family, so for me to do that was not like something anybody in my family expected or probably wanted me to do. But I was so drawn to it always from a child. I can even remember like plants and being around the woods. It was just like magical to me, and I just wanted more of it. And when I was in my early teens, I started exploring that more. I had what I would now call a shamanic breakthrough, and then was labeled a nervous breakdown because I think that a lot of people who are listening might relate to this. What I saw was that, my society was actually a little crazy, but, everybody around me was saying, well, everything's working fine. What's your problem? Just fit in with the program. And I just could not fit in with that program.
Right,
So even though there were parts of it I really liked, like I've done a lot of studying, I've done a lot of research, I've done a lot of music, and it's all been great. But there is something deeper than that I needed to pursue.
right,
So that's how I wound up going and living on a river that's nearby me. Back in those days, it was BLM land, and it was you could if you filed a gold claim, you could build a little shack and you could live on a little plot. So that's what I did, and there were like several other people in the same area doing the same thing in the summertime. Actually, eventually, I wound up spending winter there, and it was that was pretty much just me.
yeah,
But one of the things that I wanted to do that for, which is I really wanted to be in touch with the elements. I had studied enough to know that at least in a lot of traditions, you use the four elements: air, earth, fire, water.
right.
Chinese, it's a little different, but so I just wanted to know them. And something you said earlier when we were talking really makes sense to me. Is like you can't know something until you experience it. I mean, you can read about it all you want, you can think about it all you want, you can imagine it all you want, but you don't know it until you experience it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Wow. And so you say in the wintertime you would be out there pretty much by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, it's a wonderful way to listen deeply. And I think that, teasing a fast forward to my later story, I think that listening deeply
Mhm.
is what allowed me to get through my supposedly, incurable illness. Um, yeah. So what I did, and in some ways, I feel like I kind of lived human civilization in quick order because when I was living there, it's sort of like, well, I'll grant you, I was not foraging most of my own food. What you did was you walked out the mile and a half to the road and you went into town, and usually it was hitchhiking for me. And then you go to the grocery store and you come back and you bring it back on your back.
Okay.
So, that was the food part, and I was definitely using infrastructure to do that. So it's not like I was out in the wilds exactly. But on the other hand, when I got home, I was making my meals over a ring of stones with a grate on top with a fire underneath, and I was drawing my water from a spring, which so
Right.
and I was living, I had candles and kerosene, but when you're living that kind of life, you do tend to sort of go more into the cycles of natural light and dark. And so
Hmm.
dark is, as you probably know, it's traditionally a time for shamanic work because you're kind of more open to um, more subtle influences, I would
Hmm.
say. And
Mhm.
so that happened too. And then also I was there with people who before I was alone, I was there with people who were into ritual. And so we would do like sort of pagan rituals, kind of earth-based rituals.
Right.
And that was great for me because I had, sort of read about them and, played around with the idea, but I hadn't actually done it. And when you do it in an environment like that, it's just, you can really feel the sensation of all of the living spirits under the ground, in the
Mhm.
tree community, in the weather, the water underground and above ground, all of that.
Right.
So it was really, I mean, I guess it was sort of like graduate school for shamans kind of thing. It
Right.
was, um, it changes you when you do that. And I think that honestly, I'm sure that anybody can experience that change even in 5 minutes out in nature. And when I recommend practices to people, a lot of times I recommend just doing that, like be barefoot on living ground, stand up
Earthing.
against a tree. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's like if you have longer exposure, it changes you more. But even just doing that can really get you into a reset. And it's
Mm.
a really good way um, to get back to yourself, to get back
Right.
to your real self.
Had
And
you began your shaman work before you went out into the kind of going off the grid? Had you began to go into like, kind of more or less, the energy, I guess, because that kind of led you on your path, I guess.
yeah, I think it really did. That probably wouldn't have been the way I put it at that time. But yes, I would agree with you that it did. And yeah, I had. And I think one of the ways that happened was I was in the library one day when I was 14, and I felt something. It was almost like something energetic tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Over here." And I went over there. And that was the part of the stacks where the books on herbal medicine and wildcrafting were. So I started doing that. I started going out in the woods and, identifying plants and, you know, learning how you make an offering to plants and, you have a connection with them that's personal. You're not just sort of like going and grubbing around after you identify something. You
Mhm.
are connecting with them and they are connecting with you. It becomes a relationship.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't have probably described that at the time as shamanic work, but looking back on it, yeah, that's what it was. I was learning from the woods.
Mhm.
And probably that's why I went to the river and learned more. Also because my grandparents had this beautiful cabin on Whidbey Island, and originally it had, I think, cold running water and no electricity. So I knew that, it could be fun to live that way, that there were ways to live that way. And I always really enjoyed that when I was there. My grandmother taught me, like, where to find blackberries and pick them and how to make them into cobbler on the wood stove and all of that stuff.
Right.
So I knew it was possible.
Right.
Is there anything particular that you'd be interested in hearing about?
Oh, anything you want to share?
Okay. Well, I'll talk about one time when I was out on the river and there was a lunar eclipse because I was sleeping outdoors at the time.
Okay.
And, as you may or may not know, lunar eclipses can be really long. So you kind of need to be in a comfortable place if you want to watch them all the way through.
Uh-huh.
So I was basically just, lying there in my bed on the ground with the mosquito netting over me. And I was watching the eclipse and I was sort of like falling asleep in between and then waking up and then watching it more.
Mhm.
But the magical part was when the eclipse became full, suddenly there was this sort of red light that was all over, all over. And what I realized, oh, that's earth light. It was the reflected light of the earth shining.
Ah, yeah.
And yeah,
Wow.
isn't that cool?
It
Yeah,
is.
that was a, yeah. So
Wow.
it was a great, great thing. Yeah. And sometimes when I was out in the woods, I would just sit there. And I understand this is now a form of meditation. At the time, I didn't tell anybody about it because I thought they would think I was either nuts or incredibly stupid. But
Mhm.
I would sit there and I would look at like a square foot of the ground in front of me
Mhm.
just for a long time, doing nothing else.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot that way. And it's hard to describe how that learning is, but again, it was that intuitive kind of learning that you get when you experience something.
Well, that's why I'm so fascinated with it because see, this reminds me of the stuff that people were doing in the ancient times. when they actually
Mhm.
could get out in nature, become connected, and hear the voice within. And
Yes.
we're not able to do that because we're too hooked into what I consider to be the matrix, and and we can't. I mean, I'm a meditation coach, so you have to get that time inside of what we have going on to try to get somewhere and listen, go inside of you and listen. But it's that connection, that people have when being at one with everything that you're at one with out in nature is something that I'm sure that we can't duplicate, because that's actually how things are supposed to be out in nature with one. Um, so that's why it's fascinating because you're able to do it and able to do it for a long period of time. I mean, you say almost 28 years, well, 28 years actually, so almost 3 decades.
Yeah, and some of that was a lot of that was not on the river. Sort of like I moved in with a boyfriend, and we still did the same way. We still hauled water from and
Right,
from a local spring and that kind of thing. But it wasn't.
right,
It kind of like gradually, it's like that was more technology. We had a wood stove and
mm,
occasionally a gas stove, and
right,
so we used that for heat and for cooking and stuff like that. So
mhm,
that was my sort of next move into more technology, from fire ring to wood stove and
right.
sometimes gas. And
So what led? Go ahead. I'm
what,
sorry.
go ahead. No, you go ahead. Excuse me. I just want
Oh,
to make sure my computer's plugged in so we don't run out of
oh, that's
gas
fine.
here.
That's fine.
Okay. What were you going to say?
I was asking how long had after then did you kind of officially kind of get into the shaman work?
Um, I think it was so gradual, and I was so how you get kind of an idea of what being something is, and I had an idea of what being a shaman was, and I
Right.
did have a teacher, like a human teacher or two, who were shamanic, but they
Hmm.
didn't like really say it exactly that way. And I didn't honestly really know that I could claim to be a shaman. I just knew that I'd done what looked like shamanic work because shamans do work a lot with nature, and you sort of like get friends with those natural essences, which anybody can do, by the way. I mean, you were talking about how it is really hard for people in modern society to tune into the inner listening. Again, if you just want to be out in nature for anywhere from 5 minutes to a couple of days, that will give you a
Hmm.
natural boost to doing that if you're inclined to do it.
Right.
So, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
later in my life, actually, after I got really ill, I met a
Hmm.
woman who was a Native American from Canada, and she said she met me and she said, "Well, like what kind of healer are you?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, I knew that when I walked in and saw you that you were a healer. And I thought we could talk shop." And I was like, "Well, I didn't have any tradition or anything like that I was trained in. It's like I respect a lot. There are shamanic traditions that I really respect because they're ancient and they're really powerful. And so I didn't want to claim that I had been a part of that when I wasn't. And so I just sort
Right.
of told her essentially kind of what I told you. And she said, "Oh, you're an earth
Mhm.
shaman."
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that made me
Well,
feel
so
better.
how did we got we actually got a technical word for what it is you do at that point. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah. Well, I got a title anyway. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. Well, I know you mentioned, your illness. I know you said it was kind of what was kind of considered a mystery illness. Kind of let our audience know a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, what I call mystery illnesses are the ones that have a whole lot of neurological content, and they have more than that. But I'm just going to use that as a simpler way of putting it. And so there are things like long COVID, fibromyalgia,
Mhm.
ME, chronic
Right.
fatigue,
Chronic diseases, right?
Lyme. Yeah,
Anything
all
long
those ones.
term.
Yes, exactly. All those ones
Mhm.
the doctors just kind of throw up their hands and say, actually,
Mhm.
it took me 2 years to figure out that I had one of them, which is pretty common actually, because the symptoms are so weird and you just don't know what's going on. And you go to the doctor and nothing shows up in your blood panel. So, like, what do you
Mhm.
do?
Right.
Um, so, yeah. So, when I did find it out, I went on a site that my sister gave me access to. She had a doctor friend who works on it. It's a site by doctors for doctors about sort of like the latest updates on various diseases.
Mhm.
And what I read there was that my situation was what I had was progressive and terminal, which means you get worse and then you die sooner or later. No specific timeline for that.
Mm,
And yeah, so that was like it was a weird moment because it's like there was a
mhm,
sense of like impending doom. I mean, as you can imagine, like, sort of
right,
like fate striking a blow. But there was
right,
also this little voice in my head saying, that doesn't apply to you.
right, exactly,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah. And I bet
Yeah,
you've had moments like that yourself.
yeah, yeah, and it
Yeah.
didn't.
It
So,
didn't.
so what did you begin to do then?
Well, I'll tell you, I was a slow learner, and I I don't recommend the slow, thrashy learning method, but I will say that I learned, it's like I'm to the place now where I can help a lot of people speed it up because I did it so badly to begin with.
Right,
One of the things I did for the first couple of years was I researched like crazy because I have a lot of background in alternative health, and I mentioned that I like to do research. So yeah, and I had done research on things that I'd had before, and worked it out, like herbs and yoga or whatever kind of alternative thing.
hmm,
And so I thought, oh well, this is just another one of those things. So I did a ton of research. I followed a ton of protocols. I listened to a lot of people who I regarded as being a lot smarter than me, like medical doctors, a retired biochemist from Livermore Labs, and sort of like, and they all had very, reasonable sounding ideas for why they thought their theory would work.
right,
So I would try their theories and I would seriously dedicate myself to them. Also
hmm,
tried lots of diets, by the way. Yes, I did all that.
okay,
And I tried, acupuncture. I tried a lot of things,
hmm,
and they didn't work. I got worse
hmm,
until I was at the point where basically there's a term that people use about these illnesses called sleeping same as waking
hmm,
because I wasn't really sleeping. So I was kind of like a zombie
hmm.
and yeah,
Yeah, that was making
exactly.
things worse too.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm to the point where it's like I think that getting people to sleep is like the real thing to aim for, at least in the beginning, because if you
Hmm.
don't have sleep, you don't have anything.
Anything,
So
your body can't recover anything.
can't
Can't,
recover anything. No.
can't.
And it's like whatever, nasty processes are happening in your body, they kind of get a boost from that,
Can,
don't they?
can,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah.
So eventually, we clearly see that you discovered what needed to be done. So how did that come about?
Well, it came about because I was completely depleted and had nothing else to do.
Nowhere to go but up at
I
this
do
point,
not
right?
recommend that route, by the way. I think that
Right,
if you're smarter than me, I would definitely encourage that.
right,
I was sitting up one day in like the 10 minutes I had where I could sit upright because I had what they call orthostatic intolerance. If you stand up, you feel like you're going to pass out, and sometimes you do. I learned how to
right.
fall really well because
Oh,
I could catch myself before I got to the passing out point, and I would just
right.
drop to the ground, which
Wow.
was not super fun in front of friends and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
you lose a lot of your identity. And a lot of my identity was like, I told you about how I lived in the woods and walked a mile and a half out. And, it's
Right.
like I was used to that kind of thing. And at this
Hmm.
point in my life, I was working a part time job at our local sort of health food slash mom and pop store, which was
Hmm.
pretty physical. And I was doing indexing, which is pretty intellectual. And I was in an improv band, which was super fun.
Right.
But yeah, so I just started feeling this sensation that, like suddenly these things weren't so fun anymore.
Right.
And I kept getting nosebleeds and having these weird things happen. And I had no idea really what was going on. But I just thought, okay, well, you know, maybe I should switch to doing more sedentary work or something like that. So,
Right.
and then, at one point, I was actually playing a gig on May Day, and I was playing fiddle and sort of a little pickup group that we had. And this celebration, it was like a field, and there were lots of people with crafts and that kind of thing. And it was really fun. And I was walking around, and I was talking to a lot of people I hadn't seen for a long time. And suddenly something inside me said, "You have to go home and lie down in bed right now."
Mhm.
So I did. And that was sort of like the moment at which I realized, okay, I cannot like pretend this isn't happening anymore.
Right. Right.
And that was when I started to do all the research and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
But as I said, that research, it turned up some interesting information, and there are
Mhm.
some things that I still use from it, but it
Mhm.
didn't actually move me forward. In fact, I got a lot worse. So that moment that I was sitting in my house, like for the 10 minutes I could be upright, with like pretty much, like no cognitive stuff going on. It was,
Right.
I think I maybe had to be hit on the head by the two before to get into that intuitive knowing that we've been talking about, that listening,
Mhm.
because there I was, and that was pretty much all I could do. And what I realized was, it's like this whole attempting to do it in a rational way,
Mhm.
it's not working.
Right.
And what I need to do is listen really deeply. And
Mhm.
so I started to follow that, instead of like, well, I didn't even have much rational brain left. So like that was pretty easy. And I had no idea what would happen to me, but a series of events unfolded where I put myself in healing spaces and I did a whole lot of meditation and energy work. And I was sort of
Mhm.
downloading a whole lot of energy work stuff, you might
Mhm.
say. And
Mhm.
I thought that, like I would find that, it's like, please don't do this if you're out there and you have one of these illnesses. I thought that I would be, after I gave myself 4 months of total rest, that I would have like the 12 steps to how you heal these illnesses.
You,
That was
you
crazy.
kind of being your own test dummy, kind of.
Pardon me?
You kind of being your own kind
Was
of test dummy here and some things, kind of testing some stuff out on your own self.
Yes, exactly. Oh yeah, I'm a big experimenter. There's a part of me that loves to play science, and I think that's honestly what got me through. People talk about bravery, and I say, ah, that's bullshit. Honestly, it had nothing to do with bravery.
Right,
I was just
right,
curious. I was more
right,
curious
right,
than I was despairing. I think that was pretty much it. So,
right.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't learn the 12 steps because what I began to discover at that point, there were a lot of these telesummits out, and there were a lot of different kinds of energy healers on them.
Mhm.
And so I began listening to a lot of them because I was spending a lot of time lying in bed. So I figured, like, why
Right.
not?
Yeah.
And among the things I learned was that, some of the things were really, really spoke to me. Some of the things I found to be actually detrimental when I tried
Mhm.
them. And some of the things I realized were kind of bogus. So you do have to
Mhm.
sort through and learn.
Right.
And I did really sort through and learn. And I did, though, get acquainted with a healer on one of those telesummits or a couple of healers that, actually maybe three, that I began working with in, sort of in depth and over a longer time. And this is
Mhm.
what I really recommend if you have this kind of thing going on, because
Mhm.
there is no insta fix. All of these illnesses, they swap symptoms and you can lose or gain symptoms, but they're individual to you because
Mhm.
they're about your own nervous system and your own body chemistry and your own immune system, which, by the way, are three parts of the same thing, which is important to know if
Mhm.
you want to deal with this kind of thing, because
Right.
that gives you access. And
Right.
what really, after working with these healers, it's like I realized, well, the ones I was gravitating toward, they were the ones that were used to working with the nervous system and the immune system. A lot of healers don't. They're very strange. They're kind of, they're quirky. You can't exactly nail them down. So I think
Mhm.
that's why they get avoided. And also, I would say that if you haven't experienced all the weird, weird symptoms of, neuropathic stuff, you just don't understand how bizarre they can be. Like textures of cloth would affect me. I thought, boy, that was when I really didn't want to tell anybody, but I went on a forum of, of these kinds of illnesses and other people were saying the same thing. I was like, phew. Um,
Right.
Really patterned wallpaper would get to me because it was like too much stimulus coming in. And
Really?
yeah, yeah, it's very weird. And the thing that really threw me, was music was overwhelming to me because
Mhm.
I had spent a lifetime, listening to and performing music.
Mhm.
And, I tried to sort of like go to the simpler types. Like I think I wound up, on Gregorian chant, which had always been very soothing to me. And I realized it was just like riling up my system. I was to the point I was so debilitated at that point. I could actually feel that happening. I could feel
Wow.
it just kind of like,
The
amping up.
particular the particular frequencies was bothering you.
Yes, exactly. That's very much it. It's
Mhm,
the frequencies. And
mhm,
so when you have an illness like this, you have to be really thoughtful about what kind of frequencies you're taking in your environment.
mhm,
That's a really
mhm,
good
mhm.
yes, yes,
Right. So
absolutely.
did you find Sanskrit work better?
Sanskrit, what?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's kind of the
You have to explain it
ohms.
to
It's
me.
kind of a different frequency. I'm a
Oh, yeah.
frequency therapist too. So like I can kind of get into that a little bit because I try to educate people on the frequencies affecting people more than they actually realize on a daily. They just
They
don't
sure
understand
are. Yeah, when I work
it.
with people, that's one of the things I teach because it's like a lot of us, like you say, have sort of become part of the matrix and we forget that we can sense those things and
Mhm.
that they do affect us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's interesting you're talking about the Sanskrit because what I found was a sound that I not only could take but was really healing to me was singing bowls.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
worked for me.
Well,
Yeah.
that's one of the things. That's I'm a Reiki master, so I kind of get into what we call Sekim,
Uh-huh.
and where I use the singing bowl to kind of align the energy centers within your body to help clear those trauma centers out of the various. When you're saying nervous systems, we're kind of touching into those energy systems too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm very well familiar with it, and so yeah, yeah, I see why it kind of healed, but it kind of just you kind of had to go a long way to get around to this point, though. I guess what you're saying.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the singing bowls, but it's like I could tell that they were really helping me.
Hmm.
And it's like you say, it's a frequency thing. So if you need to learn to identify the frequencies that are helpful and the frequencies that are draining. And I think that a lot of my healing work was that, because I wasn't so aware, I had to learn that.
Yeah,
Sort of like learning
yeah.
an instrument, I had to learn all the keys, it's like I had to learn how to use them and, how you
Hmm.
make a tune and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. And the thing is with those bowls, like you have to kind of be in tune with the bowls. It doesn't play for
Mhm.
everyone. You kind of have to develop the energy with the bowl itself. And so, yeah, it's. I've heard of people.
Yeah.
I actually had someone on last week, and she said she tried to get another bowl and tried to play it, but she had to go through bowls because all of them didn't play for her. So,
Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of magic involved in all of this. I
yeah.
actually ran into a guy named Frank Perry, who's in the UK,
Mhm.
and he claims to be a reincarnated lama from ancient Tibet. And usually when people say stuff like that, I kind of roll my eyes, to be honest with you. But after
Right,
listening to him, I was like, okay, I'll take it, buddy. It's like
right.
he is amazing.
Yeah,
And so I got a couple of his CDs and I use them a lot.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
yeah, and I also have a singing tool myself, so it
Mhm,
wasn't that a
mhm,
friend sort of
mhm,
gave me on long loan. So I
mhm.
played with that too.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah,
breathe in those frequencies,
yeah.
and just let it do what it do.
Hmm. And I did a lot
Yeah,
of ancestral work. I did a lot of work with like DNA and stuff like that because that seemed to be like a really good entry point for what I was looking for.
right.
But eventually, I got to the point where, I learned so much from all the healers that I worked with. But I got to a point where I kind of had to do my own thing because, as I said before, if you haven't been inside these weird neurological things, it's really hard to understand how you could find your way through them, right? You just
Right,
kind of,
exactly.
yeah, you don't know the path.
Right.
So I began to, because I'd been working with this wonderful energy healer for like about a year and a half on a regular basis, and she encouraged me to do things like try energy healing myself
Hmm.
on the things that I asked her to do, and so I
Right.
would try that and I would go, oh well, I can make this work. And
Yeah.
then I just started kind of feeling around and realizing, oh well, I can play with this a lot. And one of the things that I played with was all those plants and trees and elements that I've been in the woods with,
Hmm.
well, they were right there. And
Right.
I didn't have to do anything physical. It's sort of like I translated my shamanic work
Hmm.
into energy work because I couldn't move or talk much or do any of
Right.
the physical rituals. So
Right.
it just had to be like that. But it was
Mm,
wonderful because I could just feel the support of all those things, and it was so
mm,
easy to connect with them because of
mm,
my own experience. And
mhm,
I think that that was really key to me finding my way through.
mhm, mhm. So,
And yeah, what I was thinking actually was one of the first pieces that I created for myself. I was thinking I'd like to do that now, if that's
oh
good
yeah.
for you. I call it calm outside nervous system. So, you were talking about the field, and we're sort of like we all have different names for it. You can call it the aura, you can, or the
Mhm.
biofield, or the electromagnetic field is the way I think of it. But
It's it's a
yeah,
million names for
there's a
it.
million names for it. So exactly, but it doesn't really matter so long as you know what it is and you can
Exactly.
feel what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
It,
the outside nervous system, I think of as sort of like there's a wonderful sort of confirmation for those of us who need rational confirmation, which I think is most of us, and certainly me. Um, in psychology, a few decades ago, they did these studies where they put electronic sensors on people's heads, and then they worked to measure the brain waves. And
mhm,
they found that when two people met each other, their brain waves would change. And
mhm.
it wasn't like either of them had put like a cattle prod into each other's brains or anything
Right.
like that, sort of like what was happening there, how was that communication happening
Right.
through these fields? Yeah.
Mhm. Right. Right. Almost like
So
telepathy.
yes,
Mhm.
exactly. And that's how we relate to everything on the planet. We've just forgotten the language. And this is one of the things that's sort of a bee in my bonnet about like getting people to remember, yeah, we're part of nature. And like if we work with it instead of fighting against it, we're going to
Mhm.
be a lot better off, not just individually, but as a planet.
And stop destroying
Yes, absolutely. I know. Yeah, yeah,
That'd be a great thing to do. But we know that's all about the money. It's not about preserving nature. It's about where we can tear down nature and keep building places that generate income. But in the same time, we don't realize how much we're really messing up what's connecting to ourselves while we're doing this. So
yeah. I think it's one of the reasons, honestly, why people are in such an uproar,
mhm, mhm,
politically, emotionally, health-wise, every way you want to put it. And I also think it's the reason why the weather and climate is in such an
mhm.
uproar, because we're meant to
Exactly.
be part of this, network, and we're not
Yep.
doing our jobs.
No. No, not
So
at all.
we're missing the energy, and we're
Mhm.
not allowing ourselves to be part of the energy and give back to it. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
yeah,
We've been a negative force to the energy instead of actually contributing to it. And like you said, it shows. It permeates in everything we look at right now. So it's unfortunate.
it is unfortunate, but I think that there is a way to find our way through. And I think this is one of the things that kind of honestly, I used to be very pessimistic about this whole thing all my life. Like since I was 8, I was looking at what was happening to nature, and I was going like, eh. But having gone through this experience, I now, it's sort of like, yeah. Yeah, I've been told before that what I was wanting to do was impossible. I've been told I was gonna get worse until I died, and, sort of
Mhm,
like that's sort of what people are kinda saying about the planet in a lot of ways, or countries,
mhm.
"It's just gonna get worse, and there's nothing we can
Right,
do, blah, blah, blah."
right, right.
And, I don't think that's true. I think that we need to be a lot more creative about what we do, and honestly, sort of my big picture thing behind doing the healing work I do is to help people remember that we're a part of
Mhm,
nature,
mhm,
and
mhm.
is to help people who are sensitive and creative and artistic and empathic types we all probably
Mhm.
know very well.
Right.
Yeah, that I really believe that we are the new leaders that are needed in the world,
Yes.
but we aren't leading because we feel like, well, I mean, there's a lot of history behind this, but just to give one European one, well, okay, for 300 years, people were burned and their families were killed and their stuff was taken away if they didn't think or act according to what the church was saying. So,
Exactly right.
yeah, and funny thing how, in most of history, we don't really look at that much. It's like 300 years of trauma. Okay, well, that happened, like, Yeah, that did happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And the thing about that is to get epigenetically on things like that. Not only these things happen, but we take them with us to our ancestors and bring them with us, and
we
then
absolutely do.
and
Yeah,
get people to understand that these traumatic events, like and like other events, like say people that look like me come from the South who had lived in slavery for 400 years, and now you have survival
right.
things that are running within people's bodies, don't understand them, while some mental issues are still going, and all kinds of things are going on that are, or even the things that you even consuming, even your diet, because everything kind of comes back to this traumatic energy systems within your body that have been misaligned, and to kind of get into, we kind of use let's just kind of use a chakra deal where we talk about the root chakra, where you're not grounded, you never had any grounding, so you're full of anxiety, and you basically, your emotions are kind of, emotional energy is all over the place because of what's actually been passed on from hundreds of years of traumatic events. And so yeah, it's pretty deep.
Yeah,
But I
it
feel
is.
like it can be solved though.
I believe it can. I mean, we know now from science that that kind of trauma actually changes your DNA because it changed your ancestors' DNA, and so it's like that gets
Hmm.
passed on. So if you don't do anything about it, then it's going to be there, like you say.
Oh
And
yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. We kind of like relive this stuff, and
hmm
we keep repeating the same patterns
hmm
because we haven't made that adjustment, or we're not even aware that we need to. That's
you have
another
to
one.
become aware first, because just like we all of us healers always kind of have a path of our own healing to help others begin to heal. So this was my path. It was things that my father had within him that I didn't realize with my mood made. Why am I feeling like this sometimes? Or kind of things you might not necessarily understand, but you kind of question, and then you kind of get to the bottom of it. Is like, this is something that I need to go inside and heal and deal with for myself, so that way it stops with me. you
Yep.
know
That's where the real value is. I agree. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm really glad that you brought up the emotions part because that's actually, for me, it's kind of a foundational piece to the healing work I do. One thing that was like really important for me was to find the Candace Pert's book, The Molecules of Emotion. Are you familiar with her? Yeah.
I'm not. Mm-mm.
And she was actually, she died recently, unfortunately. She was a cell biologist and neuroscientist. Sorry, sometimes I forget the terms. And she was the one who discovered that we have specific cell receptors that open for specific substances. So with the opiate receptors, I think
Mhm.
that she discovered. But then you go on from there, and now that's common knowledge. But one of the other things that she said in that book that just blew my mind. And by the way, I was reading this book 3 pages at a time because that was all I could do at that point. Um, but in a way, it was sort of good because it was sort of like reading poetry or something. It went in very deep. She said that your body's chemistry is your emotions, and
Mhm.
your emotions are your body chemistry.
Mhm.
So what that did to me was it's like going, okay, so we have agency here. We are not
Mhm.
hopeless
Right.
in an illness that is, basically, has a lot to do with crappy body chemistry. And so I began working with that. And one of the really frustrating things about these illnesses is that you can try all these things that sort of mitigate symptoms. I mean, there are all kinds of supplements and practices and things you can do. Some people do get better from acupuncture. I did not, but there are all these protocols that you can follow that will kind of damp down the symptoms a little bit. And sometimes you feel
Mhm.
like you're making progress, and then you just crash again for
Mhm.
not necessarily for any obvious reason like overexertion or anything like that.
Right.
And it's so discouraging. You don't get traction.
Right.
So what I realized by working with this idea that your body chemistry and your emotions are the same thing
Mhm.
is that foundationally you have to calm the body chemistry in order for anything to work.
Mhm.
Because, for instance, if your whole metabolic pathway is messed up,
Mhm.
then any supplement you take, how likely are you to actually absorb it? Not too
It's gonna
likely.
come right out of you. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's basically, it's like except for a few, that's basically what happened to me. It's like I had a
Mhm.
lot of faith in supplements and herbs because I'd used them lot, but like nothing was working in that department for me, really. So I started developing these foundational energy working pieces that do calm down your body chemistry. And as I did that, as I began using them, I actually, my healer that I was working with, she encouraged me to record them. So, and some of them have like plant spirit energy. I would do like tracks that are like layered tracks. This is where my musical experience comes in. You know, it's like you just layer them. Like they were sound only. Most of mine are silent or sounds from nature. And I would play these like all night for myself. And I
Mhm.
suddenly started realizing after a while, you know, like after a month or two,
Yeah.
that I was starting to get just a little bit of traction, that the things were starting to work just a little bit better. You know,
Uh-huh.
sort of like it wasn't like a big, you know, boom, suddenly I was there.
Right.
But I had to build on that foundation. But that was the place that I realized is often missing when people look at these illnesses. Because if you don't you can address your biome all you want. You can have restrictive diets all you want. You can, you know, you
Mhm.
can lie on a skateboard all you want, but it will not really permanently change your situation,
Mhm.
sadly. It
Mhm.
will just make it a little bit easier to bear.
Mhm.
So my
So,
thought in go ahead. Uh,
oh, I
what
didn't want
happened?
to cut you off. I'm sorry. I was just about to ask you what happened next.
Okay. So what happened next was actually this would be a good place for me to do that piece of work.
Yeah.
One of the pieces of work that I did, and
Yeah.
this is the one, the calm outside nervous system, because that's also, you know, I mentioned before that, you know, I worked out, and I, interestingly, this is confirmed by a chiropractor, one of the newer types, that your neurology and your body chemistry and your immune system are all like basically three parts of the same thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
one of the things that I knew I had to do in order to calm my body chemistry was to relieve the overstimulation, you know, that we were talking about, that I would get
Mhm.
from like looking at patterned wallpaper or, you know,
Mhm.
hearing noises or anything, you know,
Right.
anything like that. And I think a lot of people who don't have these illnesses but are sensitive can probably relate to this. It's just what
Mhm.
you're saying about frequencies. It's sort of like, what
Mhm.
frequencies are you taking in? How aware are
Mhm.
you of them? And
That's
how are
right.
you dealing with them?
That's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is a piece that I actually give for free on my website, sundayoliver.com, very originally named.
There you go.
If if you sign up for the email, you get the recording, which is a silent audio, and the healing I will be doing is silent too. The great thing about a silent audio is you can loop it and you can take it anywhere you want.
Now you have
So
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can use it on the spot, you can play it overnight, you can do whatever you want with it. And
Yeah.
I also give like a series of a few emails that gives you suggestions about how to use it, and you know what to you know how you might experiment with using it. So
Mhm.
I think that for a lot of people who feel, I mean, heaven only knows, all you have to do is, you know, read a little bit of news and you can get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Not to mention there's daily life and the people that we deal with and the
Yeah.
work we have to do and you know, like
Right.
that
All that.
stuff,
All that.
all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a piece that sort of helps. Um, Again, I tend to think in electrical circuitry when I think of the nervous system. So I would say
Mhm.
the outside nervous system, if it were electrical wiring, it would be like all the stimulation and all the overwhelm and stuff, it would be sort of like
Mhm.
ratchet sheet on the insulation, and
Yeah.
wires sticking together and fusing and sparking and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So what this piece does is it kind of puts the insulation back on. It's
Uh-huh.
not like a total cure, but it's a really good foundational piece if you want to like really make progress with this kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go silent and shut my eyes. I will be really boring to look at. You're welcome to do that. But what I would recommend is the place where the show really happens is inside you.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I would say get as comfortable as you can get
Mhm.
and be as receptive as you can be in this moment. Life being imperfect, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Okay.
And then just check in with your emotions,
Okay.
just briefly.
I'm closing my eyes as well.
All right. Check in with your emotions, check in with your thoughts. Check in with your body sensations, just a brief check in, doesn't have to be deep, just to see where you are. Okay, and now I'm going to start and I'll tell you when it's over. I'll be silent until then. Okay. So check in again with your emotions and your thoughts and your body sensations and notice any differences. And if you like the differences, maybe savor them for a moment because that will integrate them more to your nervous system.
Hmm. Hmm. And what people don't understand is too is right then when you're doing that, if you had thoughts running through your mind, now you're shifting your focus to the present right now. And you kind of
Hmm.
stopping that anxiety of that thought, that mind running and getting it to just kind of center on yourself and your being at a particular time. Um, and people don't know how valuable that is because it automatically calms you down.
That is such a great way of putting it. I really appreciate you saying it that way because I totally agree, and it's a really helpful way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You should feel a difference
yeah,
because you've quietened it down, quietened your mind, so you should be more calm when you do open your eyes because now you're in the present. You're not, you know, running.
right, right. Yeah, running circles in your mind or whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah,
Yeah. This is what I tell my
yeah.
clients. I tell my clients you have to turn off the car. The car can't run all night. You have to let it cut off. And that means their mind, because a lot of people suffer, a lot of my clients I've known, they suffer from sleep problems because their mind, the anxiety that's going on. And, you know, I have one person that she can't sleep through the night very well. She already had a husband who's died, so she never really slept by
Mm.
herself before. So she's already kind of get this bump in the night type of deal. And so she started able to quieten her mind and she just running it. And so being able to just kind of center her thoughts is able to at least get her some sleep because her mind is talking about what's going to happen, what possibly could happen instead of just being there. But that's most people because they're conditioned to keep their mind going, and most aren't thought on how to stop it and be center their thoughts. And and so it sounds simple, and people are like that's all you need to do. Like yeah, but once they do it, they find out that yeah, it sounds simple enough, but it's very effective.
As you were saying before, when you have the experience, it's really different than just thinking about it or considering it. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
right.
And that's why it's like basically in some ways I'm just working a different angle from what you're working is like these are supports for doing exactly that.
Exactly right. We're all
Yeah.
working together. That's why I come when
Mhm.
I ask I want a different modalities of energy healers because we have so many different gifts that we're bringing, but we all are kind of working in the same goal. You might call it something different, but at the end of the day, we're all kind of moving in the same direction. And but people kind of they need to be educated on that. And, that's more or less even people within the energy working field. Some people don't necessarily know that they just know what they know. They're not familiar with what someone else is doing, and that kind of helps. I know it helps me to learn about what you're doing because it gives me a different perspective on how I can look at things about what I'm doing. It only helps me, you know.
Yeah, same here. It's like talking to God, you know? It really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think another thing that's important about that is that, you know, the different kinds of work have different frequencies, sort of, even though they're heading in the same direction. And so, what might be really helpful for one person might not be really helpful for another one. You really have to tune in to what the frequency or chemistry is that makes you feel like
yeah.
you're getting, vibrant. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. It's kind of like just like with myself. I'm highlighting other energy healers. Someone would resonate more with you. That's I want them to be able to see and kind of tune into you. So it's not about me basically trying to do the work. It's about highlighting people who are able to resonate with various people that work for them too. So not only being educated, but like you say, they able to kind of match the frequencies with what actually works for them because everybody has what works for them best. And so that clearly gets them better healing when they're actually have comfortable frequency and belief in what's going on.
yeah. I think that is absolutely true. And I really appreciate that you're doing this because I think it is really important for people to get educated in this way. I felt like I had to kind of do it clandestinely and
Mhm.
in secret. And I think
Yeah,
it's time for that to be over.
it is.
I
It
really
is.
do.
It is.
Yeah.
That's my mission to put it in to help put it in, do my part anyway, for people to be more educated on beautiful people like yourself and and what they actually can offer to people to actually help them heal. But lack of education only creates ignorance, and we have, right now there's a lot of ignorance around some of the things that go on because they just simply don't understand. You know,
Sadly,
they
yes.
don't understand.
Yeah.
It's a science behind this. At the end of the day, people, it's not just woo. It's there's something called quantum physics that has a lot to do with these things, and
Oh, yeah. And even astrophysics, it's like one of the things I've read recently is that in astrophysics, they're looking at the cosmic web and they're saying, "My, that looks mighty like our neural networks."
yeah,
And I'm like,
exactly,
"Yeah, because our neural
yeah.
networks are part of that."
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
as they say,
yeah,
if you read the Kabbalah, as above, so below. So things keep mimicking themselves on different levels. They just don't realize how much it is. you know.
yeah, we kind of educated ourselves out of seeing that, I think, and maybe we're trying to educate ourselves back into that, you know?
Exactly, exactly. But and that's a great way of putting it because if we look back in ancient times, clearly these people were very technologically sound with what they do, and it almost feels like like you said, we've thought ourselves out of it. Now we're beginning to come back closer to what things were when these people were more connected, without just cell phones and without your TV. They were connected with, spiritual in nature and things of that nature. And even we look at the lifespan of these people who were able to not deal with things we're dealing with right now. So clearly they knew something that we know we're getting back to knowing.
I
you know.
agree. And I think people who have traditional indigenous knowledge, it's like those are people who kind of can re-educate us with those kinds of things. Yeah,
Which is what we're here
totally
to do.
agree.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's what we're
Yep,
here to do.
yep.
Mhm.
And it's like I'm not saying we can't have the cell phones and the TV and all that, but it's just
Right.
like that's not the foundation. The foundation is way deeper and bigger than that.
Oh
And
yes,
I think that
definitely.
when we get when tied into that, like the people thinking mental world as our
Hmm.
foundation, that's when we get ungrounded and yeah, that's
Right.
like when you have the positive energy current running without the negative one. It just goes
Exactly. Exactly. Well, the thing is the technology, I can't talk bad about it because, it's allowing us to do these things
right,
we're doing right now.
exactly. We're using it now. I mean, like, and I've met, and one of the things that was really inspiring to me when I did a few telesummits was like all over the globe, there are thousands, millions of people who are looking at this and like, you know, working or playing or at least inclined toward there has to be a better way. Um,
Hmm.
and so yeah, and the technology can be really useful. It's
Hmm.
kind of a neutral thing in some ways, like money, So like you
Yeah.
can use it badly or you can use it
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a great analogy. Exactly. Anything for good can't be turned to evil but that's what we're talking about, that light and that dark, it has to be a balance in there.
There does have to be a balance. Absolutely. There does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, this went by pretty fast. We're coming up
It
on
sure
the
did.
end of the hour. Anything you want to add? First of all, kind of let everyone know what's the name of your business and how can they get in contact with you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Sunday Oliver, and my website is, as I said, very originally named sundayoliver.com. You can go there, and if you are a person who has a mystery illness, you might want to look at the page where I have my symptoms then and now, because I understand there is a lot of bogus stuff out there conflating adrenal fatigue with this and saying, it's like, oh, well, I have the one answer. I'm not saying I have the one answer. I'm saying that I have a way that can really empower you to find your own way and support you in finding your own way. So on that page, I have a list of my symptoms that I had and a list of my symptoms that I now have. I'm still working on healing. I think healing is a lifetime progress.
Yeah,
And
for all of us.
yeah, absolutely. So the then list is significantly longer than the now list. And some of you may recognize some of the super weird symptoms on that then list and understand that you don't have to live with them for the rest of your life, just the way you don't have to live with depression for the rest of your life, by the way, because when you start working with your emotions and your body chemistry, that changes too. So that's a great thing.
Yeah.
If you want to get like more samples of the work that I do, I have a YouTube channel, which is also named Sunday Oliver, and there's healing work on there. There are shorter and longer videos that you can watch and get more information and experience more healing from.
Okay. Okay. There you have it. I encourage you guys to reach out and get some of the great information he has to share with you. Yeah, definitely. So I guess that's pretty much it, kind of wraps things up. But we definitely want to know is anything you want to leave us with before you go.
Well, I think I'll leave you with the thing that I say at the end of all my emails, and that is remember you're a part of nature.
We all connected with it. People don't really realize, how connected everything is. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes, nature is made out of the same elements that the stars and the cosmos are, but we can tell that by looking through a spectroscope. So when you connect with nature,
Atoms.
you're connected with a lot.
Nothing but atoms. Nothing but atoms in space. That's
Hmm. Yeah,
it.
yeah.
More connected than you know.
More connected than you know. And every time you breathe, you're exchanging information with plants because, oxygen and carbon dioxide cycle. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're really
Yeah.
connected. All you have to do is remember it.
See, we about to get started on a whole new podcast right now. We about to get into the science of things. We have to say that for a later date.
That would be super fun. I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna have
This
to
has
get
been
together.
great.
We'll get together again for sure. Definitely.
I'd love to. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has really been fun. I've enjoyed our conversation a lot. Although I've been the one who talked most, but
Well,
I've really enjoyed your questions and your comments too.
it's about you. I was just here to highlight you, so look, you did your part.
Well, it's super fun.
Well, we're gonna do it again. So, to our audience, we were also glad you guys could join us again this week. We look forward to bringing you more episodes of people, you know, healing the world like Cindy here and bringing the gifts of light to the world. So until next week, we hope you all guys can tune in again with us as we continue to bring healing and light to the world. Until then.